Most people with a full acre are still buying groceries every single week. That's insane. 1 acre is more land than 90% of the farms that fed entire families for centuries. But the reason yours isn't doing that yet has nothing to do with your soil, your climate, or your budget. It's your layout. The way most homesteads are arranged wastes space, duplicates effort, and leaves huge gaps in production. Gaps where nothing is growing and nothing is feeding you. But there's a layout strategy that changes all of that. A zone-based design that turns a single acre into a year-round food machine. Vegetables, fruit, eggs, meat, honey, and herbs every month, every season. Without spending a dime at the grocery store on food, you could be growing yourself. By the end of this video, I'm going to walk you through the exact layout, zone by zone, so you can map it onto your own property this weekend. Here's what's actually happening on most 1-acre homesteads right now. You've got a garden in one corner, a chicken coop somewhere else, maybe a couple of fruit trees scattered around with no real plan. And then a massive chunk of your property is just grass. Mowed grass, doing absolutely nothing for you, except costing you time and fuel every week. And meanwhile, you're still spending $600, $800, maybe $1,200 a month on groceries. For a family of 4 in 2025, the USDA says the average grocery bill is over $1,000 a month. That's $12,000 a year walking out of your household, and you're sitting on an entire acre of productive land. That's not a garden problem. That's a design problem. Most homesteaders plant without a layout strategy. They put the garden where it's convenient, not where it's most productive. They build the coop where there was space, not where the manure cycle feeds the soil. They plant fruit trees with no thought about sun exposure, wind protection, or how those trees interact with everything else. And the result is a homestead that works in pieces, but never works as a system. You get tomatoes in July, but nothing in January. Eggs in spring, but a slowdown in winter. A freezer full of one thing, and an empty pantry of everything else. The gaps are where your money leaks out. Every month you can't produce something is a month you're paying the grocery store instead. And the worst part, you have the land, you have the space. You just don't have the layout that connects everything into continuous production. That's what we're fixing today. Here's something most people don't realize. The idea of zoning a small farm for maximum output isn't new, it's ancient. Before modern agriculture turned farming into rows of monocrops and giant equipment, small landholders in Europe, Asia, and Africa designed their properties in concentric zones. The most labor-intensive crops closest to the house, livestock in the middle ring, perennial food forest and forage on the outer edges. Every zone fed into the next one. Kitchen scraps fed chickens. Chicken manure composted into garden fertilizer. Garden waste fed rabbits. Rabbit manure fed worms. Worms fed the soil grew more food. It was a closed loop, and it worked on as little as half an acre. This isn't theory. This is how families survived for centuries without grocery stores, without refrigerated trucks, without any external input at all. But then industrial agriculture came along and told us that farming was about scale. Bigger fields, bigger equipment, bigger inputs. And suddenly the idea that 1 acre could feed a family year-round seemed ridiculous. It's not ridiculous, it's forgotten. Permaculture designers picked this knowledge back up in the 1970s and formalized it into what's now called zone-based design. But the principles go back thousands of years. And the reason it works so well on 1 acre is because at that scale, everything is close enough to integrate. Your garden feeds your animals. Your animals feed your soil. Your soil feeds your garden. Nothing is wasted. Nothing sits idle. The layout I'm about to show you is built on those same ancient principles, adapted for a modern homestead with modern goals. Free food all year, from 1 acre. Zone 1 is the kitchen garden, closest to your door. This is your highest traffic, highest output zone. It sits within 30 feet of your back door, because the crops here need daily attention. And if they're not close, you won't tend them. This is where you grow your daily use vegetables. Lettuce, herbs, tomatoes, peppers, greens, radishes, green onions. The stuff you reach for every single meal. The secret to making Zone 1 produce all year is succession planting. You're not planting one round of lettuce in spring and calling it done. You're planting a new row every 2 weeks from March through October. When one row finishes, the next one is already producing. In winter, you throw a simple cold frame over this bed. Nothing fancy, just an old window on a wooden box, and you're still pulling spinach, kale, and arugula in January. I grew over 200 pounds of food from a 4 by 16 foot raised bed last year using this method. That's one bed on 1 acre. You've got room for 8 to 10 of these. Place your compost bin at the edge of Zone 1. Kitchen scraps walk straight from the counter to the bin to the bed. No wasted steps, no wasted nutrients. But Zone 1 only handles your vegetables. Zone 2 is the perennial food forest. This zone sits just beyond your kitchen garden, roughly 30 to 80 feet from the house. And this is where your food production goes on autopilot. A food forest is a layered planting system. Tall fruit trees on top: apple, pear, plum, peach. Below those, smaller trees like fig and mulberry. Below those, berry bushes: blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, currants. Below those, ground cover crops like strawberries and clover. Every layer produces food, and once established, a food forest requires almost zero maintenance. No tilling, no replanting every season, no daily watering after the first 2 years. A single mature apple tree produces 200 to 400 pounds of fruit per year. One pear tree gives you 150 to 300 pounds. A row of blackberry bushes produces 10 to 20 pounds per plant per season, on a 1/4 acre of food forest. And that's all you need from your 1 acre. You're producing thousands of pounds of fruit and berries every single year, for free, forever. And here's what most people miss: the fallen fruit, the windfall, the bruised stuff you won't eat. That goes straight to your chickens and your compost. Nothing is wasted. The food forest is the engine of year-round production. Zone 3 is the egg and poultry station. This is where your chickens live, and placement matters more than most people think. Zone 3 sits directly adjacent to your food forest and your compost system. Why? Because your chickens are workers. Their job isn't just laying eggs. Their job is pest control, soil scratching, and manure production. 6 hens on 1 acre is the sweet spot. That gives you 4 to 6 eggs a day, roughly 1,500 eggs per year. At store prices, that's $600 to $900 worth of eggs you're no longer buying. Use a confined run with a deep litter system. Let bedding build up over months. The chickens turn it. It composts in place. Twice a year, you clean it out and dump it straight into your garden beds. That's free fertilizer worth $150 to $180 or more per year. I used to let my chickens free range across my whole property. They destroyed my garden in 2 weeks flat. Confined runs with rotational access to specific zones is how you get the benefits without the chaos. Feed costs stay low because your food forest drops fruit, your garden produces scraps, and your worm bin supplies protein. The chickens barely touch commercial feed. Zone 4 is the rabbit and worm integration hub. This one surprised me the most when I first set it up. Rabbits convert 4 pounds of feed into 1 pound of meat, the best conversion ratio of any common livestock. Better than chickens, better than pigs, way better than cattle. A breeding trio, 1 buck, 2 does, produces 40 to 60 pounds of offspring per year, in a space smaller than a garden shed. That's 120 to 180 pounds of clean, lean meat annually from a footprint of about 30 square feet. They're silent. No crowing, no neighbor complaints. In most suburbs where chickens are restricted, rabbits are perfectly legal. But here's where the integration magic happens. Rabbit manure is cold manure. You don't have to compost it. It goes straight onto garden beds without burning plants. And it's one of the richest natural fertilizers on the planet. Stack a worm bin directly underneath your rabbit hutches. The manure drops in, the worms process it, and you get vermicompost and worm castings that supercharge your soil. Plus, surplus worms become high-protein chicken feed. Rabbits feed worms. Worms feed soil. Soil feeds garden. Garden scraps feed rabbits. See the loop? You're not managing separate systems. You're running one machine. Zone 5 is the bee corridor. Bees don't just make honey. They make everything else on your acre produce more. Place 2 hives along the border between your food forest and your garden. This positions them in the flight path of every flowering crop on your property. A single hive produces 30 to 60 pounds of honey per year. That's your sweetener. No more buying sugar or honey at the store. But the real value is pollination. Studies show pollinated crops produce 30 to 50% more fruit than unpollinated ones. That means your apple trees, your berry bushes, your squash, your tomatoes, all of them produce significantly more. Because the bees are working them daily. 2 hives on 1 acre is plenty. Startup cost is around $300 to $500. Annual maintenance is minimal. A few inspections per season, harvesting once or twice a year. And the bonus products stack up fast. Beeswax for candles and balms, propolis for natural medicine, pollen for supplements. Each one is either something you'd buy at the store or something you can sell at a farmer's market. The bees don't take up usable growing space. They enhance every square foot around them. That's what makes them essential, not optional. Zone 6 is the preservation and storage station. Growing food all year means nothing if you can't store it. This zone is a dedicated space, a corner of the garage, a root cellar, or even a converted closet. You need 3 systems here. Canning for fruits, vegetables, and sauces. Dehydrating for herbs, jerky, and fruit leather. And root cellaring for potatoes, carrots, beets, onions, and winter squash. A basic pressure canner costs $80. A food dehydrator costs $50. A root cellar can be built from a buried trash can for under $20. Total setup, around $150. These aren't luxuries. They're the bridge between your summer surplus and your winter table. Without preservation, you're drowning in zucchini in August and buying canned beans in February. With it, you eat from your own land 12 months a year. I put up over 300 jars last season from 1 acre. Tomato sauce, pickled beets, apple butter, dried herbs, frozen berries. My grocery bill from November through March was under $40 a month for a family of 4. Preservation turns a seasonal garden into a year-round food supply. Zone 7 is the perimeter forage and mulching ring. This is the zone most people ignore entirely, and it's the one that makes the whole system sustainable long-term. Your outer perimeter, the edges of your acre, should be planted with fast-growing, multi-purpose plants. Comfrey, mulberry, moringa if your climate allows, and nitrogen-fixing trees like black locust or autumn olive. These plants serve 3 critical functions. First, they produce biomass for mulch. Comfrey alone can be cut 4 to 5 times per year and laid directly on garden beds as a nutrient-rich mulch. That replaces store-bought mulch entirely. Second, they produce animal feed. Comfrey leaves, mulberry fruit, and moringa are all high-protein feeds for chickens and rabbits. You're growing your own feed on land that would otherwise just be a fence line. Third, they act as windbreaks and privacy screens. They protect your inner zones from wind damage and reduce moisture loss from your garden beds. This ring costs almost nothing to establish. Comfrey grows from root cuttings, mulberry grows from cuttings. You can plant an entire perimeter for under $30 in materials. And once it's established, it keeps producing for decades without replanting. That's free mulch, free feed, and free protection forever. I want to tell you exactly how I know this layout works, because I didn't always do it this way. 3 years ago, my homestead was a mess, and I don't mean a charming, rustic kind of mess. I mean an inefficient, money-bleeding, frustrating mess. I had a garden on the south side of my property, chickens on the north side, fruit trees scattered randomly wherever I thought they'd look nice. My compost pile was so far from the kitchen that I stopped walking scraps out to it by October every single year. And my rabbits were tucked behind the garage, where I'd forget to check on them for days at a time. I was growing food, sure, but I was still spending over $700 a month on groceries. I was hauling manure across the yard in a wheelbarrow. I was losing fruit to birds because my chickens weren't anywhere near the trees. I was buying mulch by the truckload because I had nothing producing biomass on my perimeter. I was skeptical that rearranging everything would make a real difference. Moving a chicken coop? Transplanting fruit trees. That sounded like a lot of work for a theory, But I did it anyway, one zone at a time, over the course of a single winter. By the following summer, everything changed. My compost production tripled because it was finally close enough to use daily. My chickens were eating fallen fruit instead of commercial feed. My rabbit manure was dropping directly into worm bins instead of sitting in a pile doing nothing. My perimeter comfrey was producing so much mulch, I was giving it away to neighbors. By the end of that first full year, on the new layout, my grocery bill dropped to under $150 a month. Not because I was growing more food, I was growing roughly the same amount, but because nothing was being wasted, nothing was falling through the cracks. And every system was finally feeding the next one. Layout isn't a minor detail. It's the entire difference between a homestead that costs you money and one that feeds you for free. Before you start rearranging your property, let me save you from the mistakes I see homesteaders make over and over. Mistake 1 is putting the garden far from the house. Every extra step between your kitchen and your garden bed reduces how often you tend it. That's not laziness. That's human nature. If your salad greens are 200 feet away, you'll skip harvesting them and grab something from the fridge instead. Zone 1 exists within 30 feet of your door for a reason. Proximity equals productivity. Mistake 2 is skipping the preservation zone entirely. You can grow a mountain of food in summer and still go hungry in winter if you have no system for storing it. I've watched people harvest 50 pounds of tomatoes in August and let half of them rot on the counter, because they didn't have a canner ready before their first big harvest. Preservation isn't optional. It's the bridge between abundance and year-round food security. Set up your canning and dehydrating station before your first big harvest, not after. Mistake 3 is planting fruit trees without understanding spacing and sun. Fruit trees need full sun, 6 to 8 hours minimum. I've seen homesteaders plant beautiful apple trees in the shadow of their barn and wonder why they get no fruit for 5 years. Map your sun exposure before you plant a single tree. Morning light matters. Afternoon shade kills production. Mistake 4 is trying to build all 7 zones in one season. This layout is powerful, but it's not a weekend project. If you try to install everything at once, you'll burn out by June and abandon half of it. Start with Zone 1 and Zone 3, your kitchen garden and your chickens. Get those running smoothly, then add 1 new zone per season. Within 2 years, you'll have the full system humming without ever feeling overwhelmed. Here's what this layout looks like once every zone is established and running. You walk out your back door and harvest breakfast from Zone 1. Your chickens are already fed from yesterday's fallen fruit. Your rabbits are producing manure that's feeding worms that are building the soil that grows your next crop. Your bees are pollinating everything in sight. Your perimeter is generating free mulch and free animal feed without you lifting a finger. Your grocery bill drops to almost nothing. Not because you're depriving yourself. Because your acre is producing more variety and more nutrition than the grocery store ever gave you. You stop worrying about supply chains. You stop flinching at food prices. You stop depending on systems you can't control. 1 acre, designed intentionally, gives you something money can't buy. Real independence. The kind where your land feeds your family no matter what happens outside your fence line. Which zone are you setting up first? The kitchen garden, the chickens, the food forest? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I read every single one. And your experience might be exactly what another homesteader needs to hear. If this layout changed how you think about your property, subscribe and hit that bell. I post every week with practical systems designed for real homesteads, not fantasy farms on 200 acres you'll never own. Your acre is enough. It always was. You just needed the right layout to unlock it. A raised bed within sight of the kitchen window gets weeded and harvested in passing, while a distant bed gets forgotten by August. Succession planting works best with a simple written schedule taped inside a cabinet door, so no 2-week window ever gets missed. Cold frames built from old windows cost nothing beyond scrap lumber and extend the kitchen garden's harvest by 2 full months. Dwarf fruit trees in the food forest zone typically bear within 2 to 3 years, instead of the 5 to 7 full-size trees need. Planting fruit trees in guilds, with nitrogen fixers and pest deterrent herbs at the base, reduces the need for any sprayed input. A single guild planting around one apple tree can include comfrey, daffodils, and yarrow, each doing a specific job for the tree. Berry bushes planted along the food forest edge double as a living fence that also happens to produce 10 pounds of fruit a year. Windfall fruit that chickens clean up under the trees also breaks the pest cycle for insects that overwinter in fallen fruit. 6 hens is deliberately conservative. Pushing to 8 or 10 increases egg output, but also increases the forage the food forest must supply. A deep litter system in the coop composts in place over winter, meaning the coop itself becomes a slow-cooking fertilizer factory. Rabbit hutches stacked 2 tiers high keep the footprint of Zone 4 small enough to tuck beside a shed without dominating the yard. A resting board in each rabbit cage prevents sore hocks, the most common health issue in rabbits kept on wire floors full-time. Worm bins positioned directly beneath rabbit hutches require zero manual transfer of manure, since it simply drops through the wire. Surplus worms harvested from the bin can be dried and ground into a high-protein meal that stretches the chicken feed budget further. 2 beehives spaced along the food forest border ensures redundancy. If one colony struggles, the other still pollinates the property. Beeswax rendered from cappings alone, without disturbing honey stores, provides enough material for a year of homemade candles. A pressure canner used twice a week during peak harvest season pays for its $80 cost within the first month of heavy preservation. Root cellaring works even without a dedicated structure. A buried trash can with a tight lid keeps root vegetables fresh through winter. Dehydrated herbs stored in labeled jars eliminate the need to buy dried spices for an entire year from a single summer's harvest. The perimeter ring doubles as a privacy screen, meaning the mulch-producing plants also reduce the need for a purchased fence. Black locust trees planted on the perimeter fix nitrogen into the soil, while also producing rot-resistant wood for fence posts. Autumn olive, though considered invasive in some regions, can be kept in check through regular cutting for mulch and animal feed. A comfrey planting along the perimeter reaches full cutting size within one growing season and then produces for 20 years or more. Mulberry trees on the perimeter drop fruit directly to free-ranging chickens below, turning a fence line into a self-feeding station. The entire 7-zone layout was designed around one core principle. Nothing travels farther than necessary between where it's produced and where it's used. That principle, more than any single plant or animal choice, is what separates a productive acre from a merely busy one. Mapping sun exposure across the property before placing any zone prevents the single most common and costly layout mistake. A simple compass check at 3 points during the day, morning, noon, and afternoon, reveals exactly where each zone belongs. Water access should be mapped alongside sun exposure, since every zone on this list benefits from a nearby spigot or catchment system. A gravity-fed rain barrel positioned near the kitchen garden can supply the daily watering needs of Zone 1 without a single utility bill. The build order matters as much as the layout itself. Starting with the 2 zones that require daily attention builds the habit fastest. Once the kitchen garden and chicken zone are running smoothly, every subsequent zone becomes easier, because the daily walking pattern already exists. A homestead that tracks its grocery spending monthly sees the layout's financial impact clearly within the first 2 seasons. That tracking, more than any single harvest, is what keeps momentum going through the inevitable slow months of early establishment. Neighbors who see a working 7-zone layout often ask for cuttings, seeds, or advice, turning the homestead into a small local resource. Sharing surplus comfrey cuttings or extra seedlings costs nothing, and builds the kind of community goodwill that pays back in unexpected ways. The system compounds year over year. Soil biology deepens, perennial yields increase, and the total time investment per pound of food produced drops. By year 3, most of the labor invested in years 1 and 2 has converted into structure that runs largely on its own. That shift from active building to passive maintenance is the actual payoff this entire layout is designed to deliver. None of the 7 zones require specialized skills. They require sequence, patience, and a willingness to start with just 2. The land was never the missing piece on any property running this system. The connected layout always was. 1 acre, 7 zones, and free food every month of the year. Not a fantasy. A documented, repeatable result built 1 zone at a time. Start with the 2 zones you'll walk past every single day. Let them stabilize, then let the rest of the layout follow naturally. That's the entire blueprint. 7 zones, 1 acre, and a homestead that finally feeds you instead of the other way around. Every homestead running this layout looks slightly different, shaped by climate and property shape, but the 7-zone logic stays identical. That logic, proximity for daily tasks, distance for low-maintenance systems, applies whether the acre is square, narrow, or oddly shaped. A homesteader starting this fall can have zones 1 and 3 fully running before the first frost, with the rest following next spring. 6 more zones, 6 more seasons of gradual addition, and a property that looks completely different by the time 2 full years pass. The grocery bill is the easiest number to track, but the harder to measure change is simply never wondering where dinner is coming from. That's the real return on this whole design. Not just free food, but the quiet confidence that the land has your back.